Hello, I'm Gregory Hardin II. This is the Green Corn Rebellion show. Today I'm here with Stephen Wright. He is running for Congress as an independent progressive in Oklahoma's 3rd District, which is the most of the western half of Oklahoma, including the Panhandle. Um, so yeah, thank you for joining us today. Yeah, so I have about 10, 11 questions here. So, first question is, what town did you grow up in?
Oklahoma City mostly,
Okay.
and yeah, a little bit of Lawton. I went to go to Job Corps for a little bit.
All right, cool. I'm from Shawnee, so,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, let's see here. And what do you currently do for a living?
Right now I'm in vocational rehabilitation for the VA. So
Okay.
that's a program that's specifically for disabled vets that are having problems finding full-time employment because of their disability.
Okay, cool. What influenced you to run for Congress?
Mostly Bernie Sanders. Most of the time growing up, I'd been disenfranchised really because of where I grew up. It's mostly GOP dominated, very, I want to say cowboy-like, where things are hard, they're supposed to be hard, and if there's anything you have to say about it, then that's just too bad, you're too liberal.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I started watching Bernie Sanders in 2016 and how he had gained such momentum and started changing a lot of people's perspective on what could be rather than what is, that's when I decided to start getting into politics.
All right.
Since then, the Trump administration and a few other of the GOP really shines a light on how cruel and inhumane the past have been and how they just keep reiterating it and trying to make that society now.
All right, cool. What are some of the issues that you're wanting to prioritize within your campaign?
Well, I'd like to really speak about the racial inequalities I've noticed growing up. I've had a lot of friends, people of color, whether it be Native or African American. I notice whenever I have run in with the cops, and even if they're the same group as me, that they take a lot more harassment, a lot more prejudice I see. And I noticed a lot of the statistics were a lot more people of color are locked up rather than white people that are just getting off. I'm not saying necessarily it's all white people, it's all black people, but there's a large amount. And especially with Oklahoma's past, how the police department or the police here, how they originally started as a police to catch runaway slaves.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has just kept bleeding through history, not because necessarily everybody's for it, but there's so much power that's for it. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that power goes against the people.
Yeah.
The other things I'm seeing is climate change.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Oklahoma is going to be one of the largest states impacted. A lot of them are, but specifically Oklahoma because I strongly believe the interior sea is going to come back, and
Mm-hmm.
most of Oklahoma is going to go back underwater. And we see a lot of exploitation with the minerals here, specifically petroleum,
Yeah.
the fracking and other things that are going to pollute the areas. Once the water comes back, we're going to have pests on top of pollution. It's going to make the total area uninhabitable. And I feel most of the state, we aren't focused on that yet. And it's like a global issue,
Mm-hmm.
something that's going to impact everybody.
All right. Let's see here. So you have a plan for legalizing marijuana that's pretty expansive. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, so as I left Oklahoma in about 24 or 2013,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to Washington for school, then Hawaii, and then back to Washington again. And I noticed my stuff was in botany in Hawaii, and then in Washington I was into sustainable agriculture, so I got an agrobiology degree. While I was doing that, I went to work for some companies, specifically like BMF and Pacific Northwest Cannabis Solutions and Green Labs. And I noticed a disturbing trend, especially with that industry there, specifically if I can give you a little insight into how Washington did theirs. So they did lottery originally in 2014 for licenses that were given away. And everybody applied, only some people got them, but they didn't reopen it. So now the
Mm-hmm.
licenses are $1,000 just to get the license. And how that bled through in the industry is we saw an influx of large, wealthy investors that started businesses. And then they did the same thing that capitalism does. They give the workers bare minimum, not enough to live, not a living wage, so they can increase their production. And regardless, they didn't focus on overhead. They're more just about trying to get product at the door. And that left a lot of doors open for people that didn't have a lot of experience or were backyard growers. Not that they're bad or anything. It's just the science of the industry didn't catch up to the science of today. And with all those factors coming in, I saw giant grows, massive grows, where you had teams of people that were paid minimum wage to go in there and take care of plants for multi-million-dollar companies. And that's what I kind of see happening here, especially how, I don't know if you remember SQ 778 that passed here in Oklahoma. And here recently went up before the Supreme Court with Broken Arrow discriminating against marijuana businesses.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court sided with SQ 788. But then we saw the GOP legislature later redefine how the law was going to be interpreted. So now they can't discriminate. So a lot of my platform has to do with protecting the small business growers, protecting the mom and pop shops, giving the industry back to the people and taking away from the wealthy people. And a lot of my platform has to do with that. A lot of the incentives for subsidies for lower growers, a lot of expansion into how we can make the industry more professional, not only in how we produce it, but how we present it. And one of my things with my plan is a national database. It doesn't have patient info. Instead, it's a national database that collects information from the labs. This information has to do with DNA, so we can spot the plant, and then the terpene profile. So these mom and pop shops can then diversify into specific markets for each kind of plant or each kind of terpene, each kind of medicine they want to do. And at the same time, protect it from big business from taking it. I think marijuana, I love marijuana. I'm not gonna lie, I love my weed. But I just think there's a lot of stigmatism that's been surrounding it for so long. And a lot of that's bled over to our legislation, specifically the GOP intentions with the Senate bill that recently passed that allowed them to discriminate again. And I believe the only way forward is to protect the small growers from the big growers and the big money, while also providing everybody with a chance to identify what kind of plant they can grow and what kind of medicine can come from it. A lot of the other issues that stem from my plan is I wanted to expand on Bernie Sanders' plan, where he wants to make it recreational. And I'm all for that too. I think that it's healthier than drinking. I know people need to let off steam, and I know people go drinking sometimes and then bad things happen afterwards. Not all the time, but a lot of the times. And I'm just saying, instead of getting drunk and going out and making a fool of yourself, how about you go like smoke a blunt, eat a bag of Cheetos, and watch some TV, chill out.
Yeah. All right. Let's see here. So, do you believe that the government should break up big agricultural companies who make it smarter, or that make it harder for smaller farms to exist?
Absolutely. And I think that has a lot to do to contribute with the food deserts that we see today, where we see national big companies that compete with the smaller farming communities or farms. I see a way of maybe making or correcting that so we can give more incentive for the small producers to keep producing for their local communities rather than depending on larger farms from farther away communities. So not only are we bringing the food to the local communities again and expanding from there instead of taking it from far, and all the transportation costs and things that go into that as well. We also, I believe, our subsidies, for example, focus on weight of product. And I'm all for trying to get nutrient-dense food. And a lot of that has to do with the farming methods. And the farming methods that are employed today are conventional farming, where it's row and till with pesticides and fertilizer applications. What we see from that is runoff from pesticides and fertilizers that are affecting the ecosystems. I want to mandate to where it's only organic practices that are allowed. And organic practices allow soil fauna and the accumulation of topsoil to take root, and for that to keep building rather than our current system, which is degrading it away.
Yeah.
And I want to touch back on the nutrient density that I was talking about before. We see these foods and we look on the back and we see it has calcium, it has these other things in it. But that's not the exact thing. And they only don't, they won't be able to tell you the exact thing because mass testing, you can't always tell what plant has more than the other.
Mm-hmm.
But something that always goes along with that is the degrading of soils that eventually leads to degrading crops. And that sample would have been taken years ago. That doesn't represent the nutrient value today. So a lot of it we're starving, we just don't know it. And I think that's a big issue, especially when it comes to other issues that relate to it, like mental health, how you feel, everything revolves and comes together in a way with the farming. It affects every issue. Yeah, there's a lot to say about that. There's a guy by the name of Dr. Price,
Mm-hmm.
who had a physical degeneration book that I really liked. And there's other authors like Steve Solomon that also talk about this as well. And Steve Solomon really goes out, and he's not a scientist. He wrote this, he's like reading a cowboy manual. He talks about how he lost his teeth and how it was a result of non-nutrient dense food of where he's growing. And
Mm-hmm.
really talks about how it affects your health. And that what really got me on the path of looking at nutrient density when I was in my agrobiology studies. And so that again goes around to the marijuana, I believe also. If we're going to be implementing a marijuana program to go national, I want to make sure that that program is going to be beneficial to the environment, not going to harm it.
All right. I like that. I grew up eating or trying to eat organic foods and stuff. I've always made
right?
sure. Yeah. But yeah, that's good. I like that. So do you support the Green New Deal?
Yeah, I do.
All right.
Yeah, I do like it. I'd like to expand on it more as well.
Mm-hmm. What else would you like to expand upon?
Well, I see that there's a lot of key issues that are in there with renewable energies and other things that can help make our society more sustainable. But I feel like we can put more emphasis on helping the poor become more middle class or upper class at the same time. And I know there's a lot of incentive for doing that, but I feel like we can expand it to be more specific to address more people's specific needs. And that'll only come from asking people and finding out what they need so we can help them. So the Green New Deal is great, I think. We just need to add to it.
All right. Okay, so I was reading on your platform, on your website, and I saw something about agro hoods.
Yes.
What is that about?
So that goes along with the incentives, I think, for organic farming and eliminating food deserts by promoting community growing. So we see properties that are vacant, properties that aren't being used, properties that you can use your own land. And I think if we, instead of planting grass, we plant trees, we plant food, we help our community, and we have government subsidies to help implement those programs. And coming together for a neighborhood, agrohood, I believe that we can come together as a community and grow for each other by reducing, and that will help reduce the need for importing food to our communities. This is in addition to helping farmers that just want to do farming. It'll help them with the supply of supplying the demand.
All right. And I also saw a plan for massive replanting. Can you touch on that for a little bit?
Of course. So since the colonial period, our whole method has been extraction of wealth through the natural resources. And a lot of what has happened so far is the trees being chopped down so we can put in soccer fields, baseball fields, housing. That's fine. We need places to live. We need something to go do. We need sports for that. But what we lacked was replanting the native vegetation or the things that give food to the ecosystem around. So the massive replanting is not only going to plant trees where there once was trees, but also planting the right kind of trees that actually benefit the environment. They just don't look pretty. A lot of these, I just can't believe the state we're in now, where we've replaced most of our food producing, natural food producing systems with artificial things that you plant them so they look pretty. I just
Yeah.
never got that. I grew up kind of hungry, so I never got that. So massive replanting is, I've seen on a few articles where that could be the number one solution for addressing climate change. And if I can touch on that for a moment, the replacing of grass only gives you about that much a root versus all the soil. When we replant trees, we have a taproot going further down. We have more leaves that come off of that, more surface area that can absorb carbon from a tree rather than the same area that can do it from grass. So by thinking and switching what we think is maybe beautiful, what is pretty, if we change people's opinion on what we think would be looking nice, or maybe even more or even better, thinking and changing people's perspective on what is better rather than what is looking nice that they would like. And I think a lot of that has to do with incentives that come around now. There's not a lot of incentive for you to grow your own food. Well, there is now because of the cost of food, but the incentive to grow it in your front yard, because you have so many other things. You have to pay for fertilizer, you have to keep the bugs away. There's a lot of costs that go into it.
Yeah.
And no one really wants to put that money into it because you can go to the supermarket and buy the food. And that food is, of course, coming from far away or further away places, more likely not the community, unless you're going to the farmer's market or the other places where it's sourced specifically by the community. So, yeah, the trees, we need trees back. We need trees, we need food producing trees. We need to feed our environment rather than taking from it.
All right. Okay. And you support a $15 minimum wage, correct?
Yeah, I actually want to expand on that a little bit more. I think we need to address it. The $15 in New York ain't going to buy you the same $15 in Idaho.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we need to more base it on what we need to come up with a calculation that we can figure out what a living wage is for each area, and then mandate that employer or those employers in that area pay that living wage to the workers.
All right. And you support Medicare for all?
Yeah, so I grew up with siblings that had terminal diseases. I remember how much it hurt my family watching them suffer, and they couldn't always provide for them what they needed. I understand that all the pain that goes along with watching your loved ones become sick, and knowing that there's no way out. I was fortunate. My family was fortunate in that there are still children the state helped, but there are people that are sick and adults, and we can't do anything for them. There's a lot of open gaps to where people just fall through the holes, and then they become homeless, or they die, or they just live a life of sorrow because of their sickness, and they have no help because of it.
All right. Okay. And why have you chosen to run as an independent as opposed to running as a Democrat?
Well, it's nothing to bash on Democrats or Republicans or any other party. I just feel like political parties consolidate power. They become a barrier between the constituents and the representative. And I feel I don't want to be the same. I feel if I want change, I need to show that I can provide change. I need to be the leader. I need to be an example of how I think a society or how an election should run. That's why I'm not accepting campaign donations. I'm running as an independent, and I'm solely being myself. I have no campaign staff. I'm doing everything myself because I really want this to come to fruition where we have a system that works for everyday people, that somebody can just say, I want to run for this position, and they don't have to have millions of dollars. They don't have to have a campaign staff. They don't have to join a party, and then they don't have to let that party decide if they get on the ballot. I think the voters should decide who gets on the ballot. I think the voters should decide who gets into office. And those voters shouldn't be decided on who gets the vote on what candidate, because we saw that in 2016 where we had two horrible choices. We had Hillary and then we had Trump. And who the hell wants to vote for any of those people?
Yeah. That's fair. And last question is, what kind of music do you listen to?
Alternative music, I guess. I like 90s still.
Okay. Who are some of your favorite music artists?
Oh, let's see. I still like some Rise Against. I know they're a little bit late 90s.
Oh, yeah, they're great.
90s, yeah. and I like Nirvana,
Mhm.
Foo Fighters.
What about Offspring?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Pretty Fly for a White Guy. That was my favorite song for a while. Thank
that's good. All right. Well, that's all the questions I have. Thank you for taking time out of your day
you.
to come on and answer some questions. Good luck to you on the campaign trail.
Thanks, man. You have a good night. Thank you so much.
You.
Bye bye.